This week's episode was brought to you by the generous contribution of our listeners who, from the generosity of their heart and the virility of their wallets, continue to support our efforts here at The Whole Rabbit to sabotage the Black Iron Prison, liberate the imprisoned sparks of Sophia, and stage a cosmic revolution against the tyrannical forces in high places obedient to the Demiurge. If you'd like to assist in our sacred conquest against the lords of this world, or just hear the second half of this episode, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 earns you not only the full-length edition of this episode, but the extended version of every single one of our episodes, which are browsable from right within Spotify after you log in. It's pretty rad. I will also send you a high-quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art at no additional cost to you, along with the secret keys to our Discord server, where you can hang out with the hosts and listeners of the show, where we stream Silent Hill and play Scrabble together. Hecka always wins. If you're looking for an in-depth tarot reading, I may be the best deal on the internet, where for each month you're subscribed at our $20 tier, you're eligible for an 11-card reading from yours truly. Just message me on Patreon or Discord and we'll find a time to meet up and do the reading. In this week's episode, we plunge deep into the Gospel of Judas, a gnostic manuscript which was lost for centuries only to be recovered a short time ago. While its true meaning is still argued over by scholars, we take on the challenge from an occult perspective and analyze the parts within using wisdom from both the Bible and ancient Egyptian religion. In the free section of the show, we discuss the Kabbalistic symbolism behind the 30 pieces of silver that Judas received for selling Jesus out, till the harrowing tale of how the missing codex was hidden from the public until only recently, and the controversial heresies contained within. In the extended version of the episode, we continue our analysis of the text and see where it lines up with the wisdom in the Gospels of Thomas, and begin to unpack the contents as they pertain to Jewish mysticism, gnostic cosmology, and even a hint of modern-day conspiracy theory. What exactly does it mean when Jesus elevates Judas above the other disciples? And does it mean that Judas really gets a happy ending? Or does it mean something else? Stay tuned in to find out. Thank you, and enjoy the show. You know, if you don't sin, Jesus died for nothing. What did Adam say when he was asked his favorite holiday?
What?
It's Christmas, Eve.
Oh. Lol.
Why did Adam and Eve do math every day?
Why?
Oh, because God told them to be fruitful and multiply.
Yes! I had a feeling Mario would get it. All right, who in the Bible knew the most people?
Who?
Abraham knew a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Jeez, come on.
Hello everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just tell you about heretical forms of Gnostic, New Age religious mythology as it was channeled through the subconscious mind of a slumbering man from Kentucky during World War II. Nay, we sometimes go right to the source material, which just happens to be locked away in some dude from New Jersey's freezer, because this week we're discussing the long-lost and found Gnostic manuscript, The Gospels of Judas. I'm your host, Luke Hackrabbit Madrid. I'm joined this week by the Sundog and the Sky with Diamonds, Mari-sama.
Far out, man.
And the Rubedo Rabbit, Heka Astra.
Hello.
Malachor is on vacation in Japan and will be back when he's done celebrating his birthday. We're not exactly sure when that will be. I think of all the topics we'd like to cover on the show, Gnosticism might just be the audience favorite, and I made sure to force the co-hosts to watch the Lady Gaga music video before the episode, you know, for research.
I've seen it a few times prior to this.
I haven't seen the video, but I know the song.
I definitely feel like people should watch the video, even if it is just for research purposes after the show, and see how much of what we say comes out as apparent to them.
There do seem to be some Gnostic, do I dare say, satanic themes that seem to be borrowed from this text. That being said,
It's true.
in the religion of Christianity, the stories we have of Jesus come from his adoring disciples. At least, that's how most are presented. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are traditionally the most important gospels. Gospels, detailing the life and times of Jesus Christ, each emphasizing different elements or parts of the story. Mark is the oldest and shows the human side of Jesus. This seems to have the least embellishment. It's also the one the others derived most of their content from. At least that's what scholars say. Matthew captures the Jewish theological angle. We find universal salvation in Luke, and in John, we hear the personal testimony of the one whom Jesus loved, the assumed favorite. Simon Peter may have been a close second, though, as Peter was the first to truly recognize Jesus as the Messiah, and despite slicing off a Roman's ear and denying Christ 3 times prior to crucifixion, he would become the rock upon which the church was founded. But what about Judas? Has religious history ever looked so unfavorably upon a man as Judas Iscariot, the treacherous, backstabbing, sellout traitor whom Dante Alighieri names in his Inferno as suffering in the lowest, most awful circle of hell, specifically in the region of Judea, for which after Judas it is named? There, it is said, Judas is eternally being devoured head first in one of Lucifer's 3 mouths. The other 2 are reserved for Cassius and Brutus. I think this probably says quite a bit about Dante's politics.
Yeah, it does.
It's like the one guy who betrayed God, and then the 2 people who betrayed the other God?
They're all betrayers of man gods, apparently.
So the reason behind this hatred for Judas is fairly straightforward, although some people might hate Judas because of Lady Gaga. Most Christians know him as the one who sold out Jesus to Roman authorities for just 30 pieces of silver, the same value ascribed to a human slave. At least that's what it says in the Bible. 30 pieces of silver was also used in the Old Testament as the insultingly low price the Israelites valued their shepherd Zechariah during his retirement in the post-captivity era, as it says in Zechariah 11:12.
Then I said to them, if it is agreeable to you, give me my wages, and if not, refrain. So they weighed out for my wages 30 pieces of silver.
Oh, snap.
It's like Social Security now.
Or like a one-time pension.
Now afterwards, God tells Zechariah to turn this paltry amount over to the temple, which Judas attempts to as well, likely a reference to this story. But in Judas's case, it's rejected and put towards buying a field for the burial of foreigners. It's then dubbed the Field of Blood. I guess it's still there today.
It sure is.
Shortly afterwards, Judas was said to have hung himself in guilt. If we use our Kabbalah, we get more clues. The Hebrew letter lamed is described the numerical value of 30 and is sometimes said to depict a teacher or shepherd's staff. It's the tallest letter. It stands above the others. Now, both are fitting symbols of Zechariah in the Old Testament, where his staff is named favor, and when it's snapped in 2, it's intended to symbolize God's protective covenant with Israel has been broken. Zechariah laments that he has become the spiritual shepherd of a doomed flock. Jesus even references this in Luke 11, verse 50 through 51, relating it to his own story.
Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that have been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all.
From an occult perspective, this is interesting to consider. The Hebrew letter lamed is associated in the tarot with justice. So that corresponds neatly, like cosmic justice for humanity. And you know, justice can be brutal.
Right. And the broken staff represents like a broken covenant. So it's almost like a symbol of righteous justice being carried out in the form of punishment, I guess.
Yes. Taken all together, it does mean that the betrayal of Christ at the hands of Judas is no less than in cosmic proportion, a hard facet of theological prophecy, a divinely ordained scriptural plot point that was never meant to be excluded. You know, part of God's plan. Without Judas selling Jesus out to the Romans, the passion and crucifixion of Christ would have never occurred, at least in accordance with Jewish prophecy. Yet, for your average Jesus enjoyer, the personal betrayal of the Messiah is like the most heinous act imaginable, obviously. Which then begs the question, what on earth was Judas Iscariot thinking? What hint comes to us from...
Jesus Christ Superstar?
Well, I was thinking from the ancient Roman Irenaeus, an early church father who cataloged the existence of a gospel attributed to Judas in his book Against Heresies. For over 1,000 years, most of what we knew of early Gnostic Christians was from his writings against them. The Gospel of Judas was no exception, as Irenaeus says.
Others again declare that Cain derived his being from the power above, and acknowledge that Esau, Korah, the Sodomites, and all such persons are related to themselves. On this account, they add, they have been assailed by the Creator, yet no one of them has suffered injury. For Sophia was in the habit of carrying off that which belonged to her from them to herself. They declare that Judas the traitor was thoroughly acquainted with these things, and that he alone, knowing the truth as no others did, accomplished the mystery of the betrayal. By him all things, both earthly and heavenly, were thus thrown into confusion. They produce a fictitious history of this kind, which they style the Gospel of Judas.
They, or the others who claim this, are, as Irenaeus is pointing out, a particular subsect of Gnostic Christians that we now call Sethian Gnostics. Until recently, this condemnation of the text as heretical was the only reference to a Gospel of Judas in antiquity that we knew about. And it's why we called it the Lost Gospel of Judas for a long time.
Because we knew it existed, but for hundreds upon hundreds of years, the Gospel of Judas was thought to have been lost to time or otherwise totally eradicated by the church. This was still true even when the Nag Hammadi library was discovered in 1945, whose accidental discovery revealed to the world a number of these lost writings. The Gospels of Judas was not among them. It would remain little more than a tantalizing legend until the 1970s, when it was happened upon in a cave in Almenia, Egypt, where, hidden inside a limestone box, was found a number of manuscripts contained within a papyrus book that would come to be known as the Chakos Codex, likely buried with its owner sometime in the 4th century.
The Egyptian city of Elminia was known in ancient Egypt as the 16th nome of Upper Egypt, that's Ma-Hedj, the Oryx city, associated with Horus. This area, like other Egyptian cities, has had several name changes over the course of history. During the time that the manuscript was buried, this area was most likely referred to as Aphroditopolis.
Oh, cool.
I think that's kind of a fun fact, being that it's a Gnostic text being safely hidden away in a place that reveres the divine feminine.
Well, this motif of Christianity and Aphrodite, Venus, morning star, evening star is a prolific pattern in Christianity, you could say, but you have to look just below the surface. So the peasants who accidentally found these texts also accidentally let them end up on the black market, where they were secretly shown to various would-be buyers for a considerable price. Hey, Tony, you know these books are worth something, don't you?
Hey, get a load of what this one says.
As it made its way through the underworld, it was frequently stored improperly. First in a humid safety deposit box in Hicksville, New York, for nearly 17 years, only to be later frozen, I believe in New Jersey. It's like some dude's freezer.
Is bad.
It was Pauly.
Forget about it.
When it was finally transferred to the responsible hands of Rodolphe Kasser in 2001, it had suffered considerable damage, which conservator Florence Darby and historian Gregor Wurst strived painstakingly to restore from the remaining fragments. Sadly, about 15% of the text was not recoverable. All things considered, they did a pretty good job.
At some point, it was folded up and even torn up to put the juicier bits up front in the hopes of intriguing potential buyers. And also, just for the record, if you freeze papyrus, it causes the ink to rise up to the surface, becoming blotted spots and losing the crisp edges of the brushstroke. So it's much harder to make out what it says.
So the gangsters who had it were idiots.
Yep.
I love these little details about Gnostic manuscripts, how it just seems sort of like maybe the god of this world or whatever always has a way to like, oh, I thought I rubbed you out of existence, and then it tries to destroy it before it makes it to public. Because the same thing happened with the Gospels of Thomas, and like,
Yeah.
it's quite the pattern.
The Nag Hammadi library
Yeah.
being used to burn. Oh, man.
Yeah, for kindling.
Yeah.
It's just as inane, you know? I love it. So the Gospels of Judas from the Chakos Codex was thought to have been originally composed in the 2nd century, making it exceedingly old in terms of the Christian religion, and was undoubtedly one of the many secret illegitimate books Irenaeus tried to warn his followers about.
The fact that Irenaeus knew about it in 180 AD necessarily means that the Gospel of Judas is older than that. So whether he possessed a Greek or Coptic edition himself is up for speculation, but it is well known that near the end of this text of his, he claims to have collected these heretical Gospels, but without naming particulars.
The copy we have is written in Coptic, and it was likely copied from an earlier manuscript in Greek, like most of the other Christian literature of the time. It was then published in English as late as 2006 by the National Geographic Society.
In a nutshell, the Coptic language is an Egyptian written language that utilizes Greek letters with some additional Egyptian demotic letters to accommodate for the sounds of the Egyptian language at the time. The translation into Coptic from Greek makes sense since the Gnostics fled to Egypt. The first publication was in 2006, but then a second publication was made in 2011 after a few more pieces were gathered, and those pieces, they were previously torn off and then had just circulated through the academic world for a bit. It's like, oh yeah, these pieces, we kind of had them. We were just, studying them.
And you pointed out
So
that falls in time sequence with the Lady Gaga music video, which is kind of fun.
2011 is when the Judas video came out, so that's interesting.
Illuminati ritual! And if you make it all the way to the end of the second part of this episode, we'll have some stuff to say about it.
So just as a disclaimer, like many other apocryphal texts, it is missing pieces here and there. Like Luke was saying, it's 10 to 15% of it is missing, basically. And because of this, there's going to be times when we can't know what is being said, and it will sound kind of jumbled, sort of like a radio signal that occasionally cuts out.
It's true. Some of the juicier bits are missing. The demiurge tax.
Yeah.
What the Gospels of Judas revealed to the world was dramatic, shocking, and even downright blasphemous to a devout, strictly Orthodox Christian. This is true regardless of how the text is interpreted, of which there is no scholarly consensus. With how recently the text was found, we're left with an innumerable amount of details to argue over, and some of them can change the overall meaning of the text quite dramatically. Even so, and more broadly speaking, the Gospels of Judas is not entirely unlike some modern works of fiction so popular today, where the events in the original are reinterpreted from the villain's perspective, such as Wicked, currently in the news cycle, or my favorite, John Gardner's Grendel, to name an older example. That's a really good one. I highly recommend it. The scene with the dragon is awesome.
So it's not necessarily like a redeeming story about the betrayer as much as it just talks about, does it expound upon why it's necessary to have a betrayer?
It really comes down to perspective, because you can look at it that way and you can look at it other ways as well. There's kind of three different ways to interpret this, like where he's still a bad guy, or he's a good guy, or it's neutral.
Interesting.
But it seems to be one of the, if not the only text that portrays Judas even being possible that he is a good guy.
Grendel deals with the complicated issue of like what you're saying, where it's not really in redemption of Grendel, it's more a meditation on the cruelty of fate and fairy tales and destiny and what it means to be human. It's really good. And it's sort of similar here with the Gospels of Judas, where it's not really fully clear if he's totally redeemed or not. And the devil is really in the details.
At the very least, it gives us an alternate perspective. And it's like they say, there's two sides to every story, right?
In this way, a number of prominent interpretations paint Judas as the unlikely hero, and at worst, an all-important anti-hero. But it doesn't stop there, going as far as reframing the other disciples as the real traitors and villains of the story.
I'm really excited to unpack the various perspectives taken on this, both from an academic perspective as well as a spiritual one.
Hell yeah, me too.
Well, this may sound unprecedented for Judas being the good guy. It's not as much as you'd first think. As hinted at earlier, a number of Gospels frame a specific disciple as being the favorite, or at least the most capable of understanding the truth of Christ's teachings, often shown in contrast to another disciple who's portrayed as falling short. While John, the beloved, and Peter, the rock, are prominent examples, we find in the Gospels of Mary that it is she who is the favorite, while Peter is portrayed as little more than a bigot with a short temper. When asked, Mary shares what Christ taught her in private, but the male disciples, led by Peter, call her credentials into question.
Did he then speak with a woman in private without our knowing about it? Are we to turn around and listen to her? Did he choose her over us?
In this passage, it is Levi who intervenes on her behalf.
Peter, you're always ready to give away your perpetual inclination to anger. And even now, you are doing exactly that by questioning the woman as though you're her adversary. If the Savior considered her to be worthy, who are you to disregard her? Assuredly, the Savior's knowledge of her is completely reliable. That is why he loved her more than us. Yeah, take that patriarchy out of here, Peter. Don't need any of your toxic male anger.
Peter's like, can you give us a list of people who recommend you that aren't John's, huh?
I'm writing you out of this religion.
Dude, can you imagine they made him the doorman in heaven? So is he just turning all the women away?
Oh, man.
Him and Nick Fuentes just sitting there.
Yeah, dudes only.
Making out with each other.
Oh, God.
It's like a tree house with a boys only, no girls allowed sign on
Destiny's
it.
like, can I watch?
Peter got his way. In the Gospels of Thomas, we're told Thomas is the one who understands the mysteries greater than the others. He even hints that if he were to share what Jesus told him with the other disciples, they would surely stone him to death. The same fate Judas fears he will face for fulfilling his destiny in the Gospel of Judas.
You know what's kind of funny about this? What if he actually told all of them the same thing in private, and then they're all like worrying that the others are going to stone them, but he's just saying the same shit in private to people?
And they all wrote it down like, I was his favorite, like in every fucking gospel.
I'm pretty sure that's the plot of that one Aliens movie. So even though Gospels of Thomas is like, no Thomas gets it the most, it declares that James is the proper leader of the church. And we see this reflected in Armenian Orthodox churches, where James is the chosen disciple. Meanwhile, in Mark, Jesus chastises his half-brother James and John for asking to be elevated above the others and rebukes them for not understanding. As it says in Mark 10, 43 through 45.
Whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Afterwards, when the rest of the 10 disciples heard about this, they were understandably quite upset. On this particular issue, the Gospels of Judas are not really unique. The disciples of Jesus Christ are regularly portrayed as disagreeing over issues of doctrine and even what it really means to be Christian. Academics are quick to point out that this is essentially a window to early Christianity and the things that the early Christians were concerned about. They're still hashing it out. So the Gospels of Judas are no different in this regard. They act like a scriptural time capsule, and it gives us a glimpse into that world where the early Christians were struggling over the foundation of Christianity's religious doctrine, specifically ones that would later be made into heresy by the victors.
I mean, that's really the difference between Orthodox and non-Orthodox, is just Orthodox is whatever the popular vote was, and so they get to say that it was the right way.
Well, I mean, even non-Orthodox Christianity looks upon these Gospels as hearsay or made up.
That's exactly what I mean, though. The fact that there is an Orthodox Christianity kind of implies that the others are wrong, and that's because that's the popular ideology that won out.
But I'm saying there's no remaining refuse of any other takes on it. Like, every single Christian sect believes that the Gnostic Gospels are not canon, basically.
Yeah, and obviously the Gnostics would think that their religion is the Orthodox religion, right?
Yeah.
Which is what makes the groundswell of Gnostic interest so interesting, because it almost feels perennial. Like, despite the church trying to snuff it out, it just keeps coming back.
Even after all we learned about Gospels of Thomas and all that, and the other books we read, it just seems to me like at the very beginning, the people that founded the organized church, they seem to just want to get rid of the sacred feminine as much as possible. And that's why all of these pieces have vestigial pieces of the divine feminine within them. And they were, how you said that they were hidden in a temple of Aphrodite or something. Like it just all is starting to make sense. Also, the Vesica Pisces being the symbol of Jesus, the Jesus fish, they even still use some of the feminine symbols, but it doesn't make sense because there's no text to connect it to in the mainstream religion because it's been erased from the very beginning.
And the divine feminine will make a big appearance about halfway through the text. So in the Gospel of Judas, Jesus prophesies that the people are not going to understand his message, and he entrusts his message alone to Judas for him to carry the secret truths, which he tells him the other disciples will absolutely reject. But as we zoom in and become more detailed in our analysis of the Gospel of Judas, we enter into a territory where even scholars disagree over exactly what's being said or implied.
And to be fair, there is often room for interpretation even in the canonical Gospels, and those are also debated among scholars.
Yeah, you can debate yourself blue over the normal Gospels, right? Just the canonical ones. We could continue fighting over those for thousands of years.
I mean, it's ultimately the reason why you end up with all these different branches of Christianity.
Yep.
It's difference of interpretation.
And some scholars pointed out that each of the disciples may, how do I say this, metaphorically stand for different groups of people or different denominations. It's like, oh, we're part of, this guy's denomination and he's the one who had it all figured out, right?
Well, it's like the Lutheran challenge to the church of being like, well, actually, the Gospels can be interpreted in whichever ways that it makes sense to you. And that was extremely heretical for that time.
Yeah, they championed for average people to read the word and interpret it rather than you having to go through a priest in order to experience or hear or even, I guess, understand the gospel.
And be told what it means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because in Catholicism and in some Orthodoxy, the priest or the bishop or pope or whoever, they're stand-ins, they represent God. So you have to obey them even though they're men. And Lutherans rejected that idea.
Well, it's interesting because it comes back to the shepherd idea. You've got your priest or your pope and they're the authority figure. And so their authority is the guidance of the flock. So it's kind of interesting to be well, actually, we don't need to be guided or told what to do.
Maybe guidance, yeah, but not being told authoritarian, not being forced to do what they're told.
Yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing about Christians. They're naturally rebellious against the power structure. That's the whole problem with them.
Free will is part of salvation. You can't be forced to repent and stuff, or it doesn't work.
Well, early Christianity was just a hot mess of rebellion in the first place. So
They're a biker gang, just like in the music video.
Yep.
So let's get into the Gospel of Judas. So it begins with what's called the incipit, which is a very academic word of saying introduction. The Gospel of Judas begins just prior to Passover when Christ, unbeknownst to his followers, is already planning for his betrayal and crucifixion. In short, the incipit establishes the premise.
This is the secret message of judgment Jesus spoke with Judas Iscariot over a period of 8 days, 3 days before he celebrated Passover. When he appeared on earth, he did signs and great wonders for the salvation of humanity. Some walked in the way of righteousness, but others walked in their transgression. So the 12 disciples were called. He started to tell them about the mysteries beyond the world and what would happen at the end. Often he didn't reveal himself to his disciples, but you'd find him in their midst as a child.
So this is about a week and a half before Passover.
I also think it's kind of fun that Jesus can appear as a child. He's just shape-shifting, staying hidden, you know.
Hey, John, give me $1.
I think of that last part as being a metaphor, meaning that instead of sitting around and preaching or revealing, he was, as a child, taking in what was happening and perhaps even just innocently flowing through or playing lightheartedly.
He's just like running up behind the disciples with a buzz shaver and giving them bad haircuts all of a sudden. Just
Playing with a stick.
whap.
Turning their wine into water.
Hey guys, this is a great stick.
Making fart jokes, fart sounds in the corner.
The incipit also makes it clear that this will be the Gospel of Judas, not so much a Gospel by Judas. This is a subtlety that's important to keep in mind. As we might expect, Judas, even in his own Gospel, is not expected to live very long after the events which are soon to come.
So the word gospel essentially means good news, and the Greek titles of the Gospels translate like saying the good news according to so-and-so. And that according to part is not included in the Gospel of Judas, meaning that there is no claim that Judas wrote this, but rather that this is the good news of or for Judas. And that distinction is actually pretty important as a rectifying text for Judas in a more positive light. Like, hey, it's good news for Judas.
It may thus indicate that Judas was the first Christian martyr, an ironic development, as we will soon see.
Sorry, I just saw your next title.
I don't think the sections came with titles, so anybody who just wants to can assign sections of the text a title. And I call this one, Jesus Dunks on the Disciples.
Jesus dialogues with his disciples. Prayer of Thanksgiving, or the Eucharist, one day he was with his disciples in Judea, and he found them gathered together and seated in pious observance. When he approached his disciples, gathered together and seated and offering a prayer of thanksgiving over the bread, he laughed. The disciple said to him, Master, why are you laughing at our prayer of thanksgiving? We have done what is right. He answers and said to them,
I'm not laughing at you. You are not doing this because of your own will, but because it is through this that your God will be praised.
They said, Master, you are the Son of our God. Jesus said to them,
How do you know me? Truly, I say to you, no generation of people that are among you will know me. You don't know me?
Oh shoot, your entire generation will never know me.
Clearly, hip-hop Jesus is the one we're confronted with in the Gospel of Judas, and nobody is safe when he's on the mic. This will be a diss track right from the outset, and most interestingly, it's directed at his own entourage. Jesus finds the disciples in pious observance of what appears to be the Eucharist. The word Eucharistine and Eucharistia is used in the text. It seems to be some sort of ritual involving bread, which the disciples believe is the proper dedication to their God, Christ's Father. Yet, Christ rebukes them and accuses them of performing their ritual in service to a God unrelated to himself. When the disciples attempt to correct Jesus by telling him that he's none other than the Son of their God, he objects, claiming that they, along with everyone else, have fundamentally misunderstood him and are basically offering sacrifice wrongly and to the wrong God. In later portions of the text, we figure out precisely who, exactly what this Thanksgiving or Eucharistia represents, and why it's being criticized exactly is not something scholars have a consensus on, but one of the prominent translators of the text, Professor David Brack, a religious studies... Bracky? Okay. He's a religious professor at Indiana University. He offers us some possibilities. If we suppose we are discussing the Eucharist specifically, might it be that the problem is the idea of sacrifice itself, or more specifically, a celebration of Christ's death as one? Is it the Jewish or temple-bound quality of the ritual? Is the ritual offered to the wrong deity? Is the problem that the ritual is presided over by a priesthood? It's quite possibly any number of these things, or maybe all of them.
All of the above.
The all-inclusive option does seem the most likely, considering the themes that will follow directly after. Either way, the disciples are gaffing it bigly, and generally stand accused of not picking up what Christ is putting down.
This is the first instance in this text where it is implied that the disciples do not worship the same God as Jesus. The disciples are left with the impression that it means that they are either worshiping the wrong God or they're doing it wrong, and possibly even both. And the difference pointed out here is that the God the disciples are worshiping appears to require sacrifice and praise, a theme which very quickly would qualify their God as a demiurge, and this as a Gnostic text, which of course it is. Another interesting part about this is the ritualized giving of thanks over bread itself. If you dig a little bit deeper into this practice, you find that it is older than the established concept embodied in the ritual Eucharist we know today, which came into practice obviously after Christ's death. In modern times, we relate the bread to the body of Christ, and so obviously they had to be practicing a ritual of some kind that existed prior to Jesus' death, since Jesus is still alive to laugh at it in the first place.
Oh, interesting. Like, just making it sound that way makes it sound bad. Good catch.
So one ancient Jewish ritual blessing that is still practiced today is called hamatzi. It's a prayer given over bread before eating it. This practice goes way, way back, and it gets its origin from the promise of God to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, according to the established beliefs, at least. So hamatzi means to be brought out, and it's related to the exodus from Egypt through bread in the same way that the wheat is brought out of the earth, and God is the liberator and sanctifier of both circumstances. In past Gnostic episodes we did, like the Gospel of Thomas, we talked about how a lot of what Jesus says is very much in line with both ancient Egyptian wisdom and Platonism.
They're running around with all these Greeks and Greek philosophy, so it makes sense.
Yep. In another Gnostic text called Thunder Perfect Mind, a female divinity which could be identified as the Sophia states, "I am the one whose image is great in Egypt." Then later in the text, she says, "And come forward to me, you who know me." So a few things stand out to me, being that this is a Gnostic text. The ritual blessing of hamatzi is both a blessing which gives thanks for leaving Egypt, while simultaneously relating oneself to a consumable product fashioned from the earth.
Corn! It's all corn!
It's corn.
It's got the juice.
So not just this, but this particular blessing glorifies this aspect while simultaneously ignoring the divine feminine in the symbol used for the divine feminine in ancient Egypt, and that's the bread loaf itself.
Oh.
For those listening right now that listened to the previous episode about the Gospel of Thomas, you might remember that I went on a bit of a tirade about bread symbolism, and I highly encourage anyone that's interested in unraveling this text further to also revisit that episode, because these Gnostic texts really do complement each other.
I can't help but think of yeast.
Exactly. So to sum this first scene up, the disciples' practice of blessing and giving thanks over the bread is inherently linked to the harvesting Saturnian figure of the Old Testament God, and void of a conscious connection to the divine feminine, or Sophia. An interesting testament to this is that traditionally, matzah is unleavened bread, meaning that the bread is not allowed to rise from the yeast before baking. This bread is used in Passover and has traditionally stood as symbolic for the Hebrew people's hasty fleeing from Egypt. Matzi sounds strikingly similar to the ancient Egyptian word matzi, which means to birth or to be born.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
And as a noun, it means birthing or childbearing. So to say that something is born of, as in a person or a generation, you would say masut usir, which translates roughly to birthday of Osiris, as masut is birth or to be born, and usir is Osiris. And just to kind of like go a bit nerdy on this, the hieroglyphs for masut are in the show notes for anyone interested, but essentially they are hieroglyph F31, which is a hieroglyph that supposedly depicts 3 skins, as in leather, animal skins, tied together. And it looks similar to the S16 hieroglyph used for sparkle or shimmer, as in light reflecting, but this hieroglyph of the bound hides on its own means born of.
Oh.
Sounds a bit Gnostic, right?
As you pointed out before the show, bound in flesh.
Bound in flesh in the iron prison. But this hieroglyph is followed by the whale chick, which is the common hieroglyph for child, and then the third hieroglyph is a bread loaf.
It sounded like you said whale. You meant quail, right?
Quail, a quail chick.
Like Dan Quayle.
Like the Egyptian version of a chicken.
Got it.
A baby chicken. So ancient Egyptian language was highly metaphorical and steeped in underlying symbolism. So you could interpret this as being an emanation of the bound flesh, which is the child from the mother. And for me, this is no small point to make, given the link between Osiris as a Saturnian figure and the generation of wheat from earth to harvest. And when you say hamatzi, it also draws upon the Egyptian Ha, which is the god of the desert. And the desert is an infertile place where growth is futile. It makes sense to me why Gnostic Jesus would see this as an error, because he almost certainly was familiar with these ideas, as even the most staunch of critics acknowledged that he had lived at least for 3 years in Egypt. If Jesus did have this understanding of the Egyptian Mutsi, then he might interpret his disciples doing this ritual as blessing the eating of or destruction of his earthly body. And I think that's kind of interesting, since this event happens before Christ declares at Passover that the bread is his body. I'm wondering if this event is the moment that Jesus realizes that he's going to die.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when we were reading about the Eucharist. That's the blessing of the body and blood of Christ in the modern church. So they were performing it before his prophecy was even fulfilled.
I mean, that blessing is ancient, that particular blessing.
But before it was readapted. So again, he was calling them out for worshiping an old God, and then he was right, because it is old. It's an old school, but it had not yet been readapted to, to his death and resurrection.
And I think I'm picking up what you're putting down, Hecka, which is like, oh, if the disciples are already ritualistically eating the dead body of Christ, it means that they're like fixing to kill him, or like they kind of need that to happen for them to have their religion. It's like an excoriating criticism of early Christians, if we consider that the author is probably trying to make a criticism,
Yeah, and it's also very much linked to the old ways, which would be the Old Testament, which really is what is being kind of exposed for being faulty with Christ.
Right. And in effect, too, before you would have ritual sacrifices of blood as well, which Jesus, apparently his sacrifice puts an end to that old idea of worship, of how to worship.
Yes, this is an active idea, both in the Greek world and in Judea at the time. Like, people are kind of like, I don't think we should do human sacrifice anymore. And it's also sort of around this time that I think Rome makes it illegal. So it's currently in this phase where people are wanting to move away from sacrifice. And it's sort of seen as this antiquated, gross thing. It's starting to. So it's at this point, the disciples, they become angry.
When his disciples heard this, they started getting angry and infuriated and began blaspheming against him in their hearts. When Jesus observed their lack of understanding, he said to them,
"Why has this agitation led you to anger? Your God, who is within you and have provoked you to anger within your souls." You mad, bro? You mad? Let any one of you who is strong enough among human beings bring out the perfect human and stand before my face. Jesus basically saying, you can't see me.
Scathing burn. They all said, "We have the strength," but their spirits did not dare to stand before him, except for Judas Iscariot. He was able to stand before him, but he did not look him in the eyes, and he turned his face away. Judas said to him,
"I know who you are and where you have come from. You are from the immortal realm of the Barbello, and I am not worthy to utter the name of the one who has sent you."
When challenged, only Judas has the courage to stand before Jesus Christ. And when he does, despite being unable to make eye contact with Jesus, he's still able to accurately identify who Jesus is and where he comes from, the Barbello.
Before we jump into who or what is the Barbello, I just wanted to look at how Jesus asked who had the strength to stand before him. And obviously he's not asking who's capable of having the physical strength to stand, but a more esoteric strength or power. If we superimpose a Kemetic understanding on this question, he's asking about Sekhem, power, a raw and volatile spiritual power, which is acknowledged as being derived from a divine feminine principle. In Egypt, that would be Sekhmet, the gaze of whom is widely renowned for its destructive nature. Hence, Judas is not looking him in the eyes. The gods Horus and Set, known as the two Sekhem, or the two powers, can also be related to Jesus and Judas in a parallel way with this encounter. Set, in harmony, plays a supporting role to Horus.
But who is Barbello? Principally, the Barbello is a concept we find referenced in numerous Gnostic texts, including the Pistis Sophia, the Allogenes, and especially the Apocryphon of John, which exhaustively details the roadmap of this heavenly world of light from which Jesus came to save us. Some of this heavenly roadmap will also be discussed here in the Gospel of Judas, but thankfully, Barbello is one of the easier aeons or angels to understand. In Gnosticism, especially of the Sethian variety, the highest god is the first principle or parent of the entirety, generally considered unknowable, and is the thing Judas is referring to when he says he cannot utter the name of who sent him. For those more familiar with Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism, this concept is similar to Kether.
While it seems difficult to determine the exact etymological root for the word Barbello, in Hebrew it appears to be related to the son of the sun. That's S-O-N of the S-U-N. And this makes a pretty good case for Jesus being related to it, especially to me, given the earlier association to Sekhmet being the power directly associated with the sun. You can also think of Jesus in the context of Tiferet as the sun, like consciousness extended from Kether beyond the abyss, which is also how some Egyptian myths describe the birth of Ra from a tomb. However, it's also proposed that the word barbello could be derived from the Coptic verb berber, which means to overflow or to boil over. And this too would make sense to relate it to Kether as something like an overextension of the light of Sophia, like a boiling wisdom pot spilling over and emanating.
I imagine this is the correct attribution because this is exactly how barbello is explained, as a boiling over of the first unnameable principle. It is a coming or bringing forth, like a womb. The barbello is often understood as the supreme feminine in this way, and it's the second principle from which emanates all the others after it. In this description, she sounds remarkably similar to Hakma or wisdom on the Kabbalistic tree of life, as Hecka was hinting at, which is the first emanation of Kether. In the trimorphic protonoia, a Sethian Gnostic text describes the barbello in her own words thusly.
He perpetuated the Father of all aeons, who am I, the thought of the Father, protonoia, that is, barbello, the perfect glory, and the immeasurable, invisible one who is hidden. I am the image of the invisible Spirit, and it is through me that the all took shape. And I am the mother, as well as the light, which she appointed as virgin, she who is called Merothea, the incomprehensible womb, the unrestrainable and immeasurable voice.
So the big Barbie in the sky. This apparently impressed Jesus enough to single Judas out. He had answered correctly. Jesus takes him aside to speak with him privately.
Knowing that Judas was reflecting upon something that was exalted, Jesus said to him,
"Step away from the others, and I shall tell you the mysteries of the kingdom. It is possible for you to reach it, but you will grieve a great deal, for someone else will replace you, in order that the 12 disciples may again come to completion with their God."
Judas said to him, "When will you tell me these things? And when will the great day of light dawn for the generation?" But when he said this, Jesus left him.
Bye, Felicia. Well, ultimately what happens is still up for debate. It sounds like Jesus is telling Judas that he alone will be trusted with the mysteries of the kingdom, but it will cause him grief, and above all, separation from the other 11 disciples, who must replace him in order to complete their God. We find it in this passage that Christ is suggesting that Judas, although falling short as he is now, has the potential to reach the mysterious kingdom of heaven, which is important to remember when the murky issue of Judas's destiny comes up later. Like, he has the potential, it's not sure if he's going to get there.
One possible interpretation of this that I'd like to throw on the table here is that when Jesus says that Judas will be replaced, it could mean the earthly legacy of his knowledge. The mainstream and widely accepted concept of Judas as a betrayer and heretic has itself become a kind of egregore or spiritual concept. If you call someone a Judas, it's widely considered a bad thing, unless, of course, you're Lady Gaga. Whatever the truth may have been, we don't know, but this text might imply that the idea of who Judas is necessarily replaced in a way, and that this must occur in order for the God of the Old Testament to continue to be praised and worshipped even in the future. So despite this, Jesus says it's possible for Judas to reach the kingdom, or at least understand the mysteries, but that he will suffer with grief in doing so. And then there's also Paul, who is not originally a disciple, but who as a witness to the resurrection can subsequently be thought of and referred to as the 13th apostle. And the evidence for this can be found in the New Testament in Romans, as well as 1 Corinthians 1:1. If this is what was implied, Jesus appears to be precognitive of the events of his own death and resurrection, and scholars have debated quite a bit about these details and what exactly it is that Jesus is saying here. If Jesus was aware of Paul's contributions to the later interpretations of the spiritual current, then it also hints how the resulting perceived significance of Jesus's resurrection will unjustly overshadow the true spiritual knowledge that Judas will receive here. And this, of course, pleases the demiurge.
So, and I mean, I agree with you too, is that I think Jesus was referring to like the whole concept of Judas being the bad guy would stick with the religion and therefore like pretty much undo anything, like all of the knowledge that he was trying to bring. Like, it's not necessarily about that specific generation in time, but like generations upon generations that follow that same, the old God, the God of the Old Testament will continue on. And even if you see the truth, you're not necessarily guaranteed, a good life because of the persecution of the people that are still following the old ways. I mean, that's at least kind of what that was saying to me. So when Judas asked, like, hey, like, when is the good news really going to be let out? Like, when are people really going to,
Yeah.
get on board with this shit? And he's just like, I can't tell you. Like, Jesus didn't answer because there was no point in answering because all of those people would be long dead.
Or there's also like, it's going to cause you grief because the Judas current that's going to go forward is not going to be what you think it's going to be.
Right? Like, everybody will turn against you and you'll have to carry the burden. Like, you can't tell people because no one's going to listen.
What I mean by the Judas current is like, because all of the disciples have followers in their footsteps. So the people who would pick up whatever the Judas current is and follow in his footsteps might cause him grief.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, look how it turned out for Norman Reedus.
The next morning after this happened, Jesus appeared to his disciples again. They said to him, Master, where did you go? And what did you do when you left us? Geez, so needy. Jesus said to them,
I went to another great and holy generation.
oh, it's like BRB going to the rapture.
Oh, burn.
Just came back from a sick party. You were not invited.
Saw your great grandchildren go to the lake of fire. His disciples said to him, Lord, what is the great generation that is superior to us and holier than us, that is not now in these realms? When Jesus heard this, he laughed and said to them,
Truly I say to you, no one born of this realm will see that generation. No army of angels from the stars will rule over it. No persons of mortal birth will be able to join it, because that generation does not come from, that has become the generation of the people among them, is from the generation of the people, the powerful authorities who, nor the powers, those by which you rule.
When his disciples heard this, they were troubled in spirit. They could not say a word.
Mic drop. Here Jesus sounds like he's probably doubling down on the comment he made earlier that no generation of the people among you will know me. Naturally, this disturbs the disciples greatly. Well, this may tempt us to declare the Jesus of the Judas gospel is too harsh, exclusive, or even esoteric. The sentiment he expressed is not entirely unrepresented in the religion today through the ritual of baptism, as it declares in John 3:5-6.
Jesus answered, Verily, verily I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit.
The big difference here is in the Gospel of Judas. The entrance into God's kingdom is not so much a matter of ritual, but something more esoteric, which we could argue it's saying also in John. It's, you decide for yourself. In fact, Jesus is about to take a hard left from John, warning us that spiritual dependence on ritual is precisely the thing leading the disciples astray, and is in fact preventing them from entering the kingdom of heaven, even going as far as to suggest it will bind them to a false or lower god who greedily hungers for their burnt flesh and blood.
Corn people.
It's corn.
It's got the juice.
I mean, they got a whole chapter in the Old Testament how to prepare the corn. So what are you gonna do?
I'm down with you guys are all caught up in the ritual. You don't even know what you're doing anymore.
Yeah.
It makes total sense to me.
So now that we're talking about corn people and generations, I think this is as good a time as any to bring up how the word generation appears 50 times throughout this very short text. And who knows how many times it appears in the 15% of the fragments that are missing. That's a lot of times it's mentioned for a very tiny text. So to me, that says it's a significant concept to this text, and it's worth looking at. Coptic scholars know that the likely word translated for generation would have been the Greek word genea, and this word is also used throughout the canonical Gospels. Looking at the translation for generation as referring only to a human lineage is something that several scholars point out as problematic. So for one, Gentiles cannot claim blood lineage to the tribes of Israel, and we know that Gentiles were welcome. The word genea has a much broader usage than that too. It's used very much in a way that ancient Egyptian ideas were used, and that's metaphorically. So metaphorically speaking, genea is used to describe something that is generated from something else. A generation being a collection of things which are brought into being by something. And in this way, the term generation absolutely can be thought of as a lineage of ideologies, including ideologies being born at that period of time, and that's Christianity. Like saying birds of a feather flock together, I just find this fascinating because this context of genea provides an image of a more self-aware Jesus who acknowledges the future ideologies that are going to be born from all of this.
Okay, so that's breaking it down in a way that I can digest and understand, because it's not necessarily generations of people that are born. It's because he's basically saying if you get these basic ass ideas wrong at the very, very beginning and you continue to do the old shit, you've just screwed it up for everybody down the line. Like no one will ever be able to understand, the true way to the kingdom because you have started with a bastardized way of doing it. And that's where all the pagan rituals came in. And he's saying to go away from that and do something different, like have a one-on-one relationship with God and not necessarily rely on the rituals for him to hear your prayers or whatever.
And this whole generation being an ideology thing, it also throws traditional Judaism under the bus because that also an aspect of that relies on blood lineage.
Correct. But Janaea meaning, like, if you start with the wrong idea, the only ideas that will propagate out of that are wrong ideas.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's reminiscent to the idea of, quote, race in the occult, specifically how, like, Blavatsky was using it. In so much as race doesn't necessarily imply genetics or phenotypes or the color of your skin. It, like, more has to do with your thought, your culture, your dress, the food you eat, the people you hang out with. And so, like, this great coming race or this great generation is like not so much about the color of your skin or your genetics. It's more like, did you get it right?
Like the culture that's built in. Yeah. Because also, your outlook as a culture can change the way you think about things or process information. So that makes sense.
Which is why the demiurge wants to repress it. Of course, that's if you believe the words of Philip K. Dick, who essentially says that works like the Chacos Codex, the Gospels of Thomas, are what he calls the plasmate. It's living information. And to be possessed of this living information is to be transformed into said generation. At least that's the idea.
The living word.
Yeah, like grace, like allowing that energy to work through you naturally in a flow state. It's not about performing ritual or reading a book.
It's your vibes, man.
Which makes it so much more unscrupulous that somebody would attempt to profit from sharing it with others. But speaking of which, if you'd like to hear the rest of the episode about the Gospel of Thomas, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you the extended version of this episode, you'll get the extended version of all our episodes, including the ones about the hypostasis of the archons and the Gospels of Thomas, which go pretty well with this episode, like peanut butter and chocolate. That being said, if you subscribe right now, I'll even send you a 5x5 high-quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art, which is guaranteed to piss off the people on the left and the right, something we love to do. But not only that, you'll get the secret keys to our Discord server, where you can talk to us about all the stuff you found in the Gnostic Gospels, or just join us for a game of Scrabble, where Hecka Aster will beat your ever-living pants off.
Yeah.
I like Scrabble.
Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew, pew.